The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the sleepy streets of Pine Hill, a quiet town tucked deep in the American Midwest. Nothing much ever happened there. That was, until the doors of Grand Meridian Bank creaked open one Thursday afternoon, and in walked a man who looked like he belonged to another century. He was stooped with age, his shoulders sagging beneath the weight of a large sack slung over one side. The sack was made of worn burlap, stained from years of use, and he carried it with both effort and pride. His cap, faded and torn, hid much of his face, but the few who noticed him that day assumed he was either lost or looking for a handout. Inside, the bank was business as usual. A few customers chatted quietly. Bank tellers tapped on keyboards behind sleek glass counters. A young man wearing a name tag that read Jacob was helping a woman deposit a check. The branch manager, a well-dressed man in his 40s named Thomas Brenner, stood at his glass-walled office sipping coffee. The old man shuffled to the center of the room. His movements were slow but deliberate. He stopped, took a deep breath, and lifted his head. His eyes, sunken but sharp, scanned the room. "This bank," he said, his voice thin but unwavering, "belongs to me." The room went still. For a moment, there was only silence. Then came a low chuckle from a man near the deposit slips. Another customer laughed. A teller exchanged a glance with her colleague and stifled a giggle. Jacob looked up, confused. The security guard, a heavy-set man with close-cropped hair and a badge that read Dennis, crossed his arms and took a step forward. "Sir, I think you might be mistaken. Maybe you should sit down while we get you some help." The old man didn't respond. He simply let the sack drop. It hit the marble floor with a thud that echoed throughout the lobby. People froze. Then, slowly, he bent down, unknotted the top of the sack, and pulled it open. What spilled out wasn't junk. It wasn't trash. It was history. Bundles of banknotes, old, yellowed, thick with dust, tumbled out in stacks. Some had paper bands bearing a logo not seen in over half a century. A leather-bound ledger, its spine cracked and brittle, followed. The old man placed it gently on the floor. Thomas Brenner stepped out of his office, frowning. "What in the world is this?" he asked, approaching slowly. The old man met his gaze. "Proof," he said simply. "Proof that I founded this bank." Thomas chuckled nervously. "Sir, I think there's been some mistake. Grand Meridian Bank was founded decades ago by a man named Clayton R. Bell." "I am Clayton R. Bell," the old man replied. The name struck like a thunderclap. Several people gasped. One woman dropped her purse. Thomas shook his head. "That's impossible. Clayton Bell died years ago. The founder of this bank would be over 100 years old." The old man's eyes didn't blink. "And yet, here I am." Dennis, the security guard, looked at Thomas. "Should I call someone?" Thomas waved a hand but kept staring at the ledger. "Wait." He knelt down and picked up the ledger, flipping through its pages. Names, dates, and signatures, some matching the framed documents that hung on the wall behind the counters, stared back at him. "My God," Thomas whispered. Clayton Bell, if that was really him, reached into the sack again and pulled out more papers. Deeds, contracts, legal filings, some stamped, others notarized. All bore the same name. "They said I was unfit," the old man said. "They forged documents. My partner, Walter Prescott, convinced the board to remove me. Said I was too old-fashioned. Then he erased me. Took everything." A teller near the vault gasped. "That name, Walter Prescott, that's on the dedication plaque." Thomas examined the documents more closely. His hands trembled. These say you never signed over ownership. You were never compensated. They show that. This bank was stolen." The crowd had grown silent again. No more laughter. No more glances exchanged with amusement. The old man, Clayton Bell, nodded slowly. "That's why I came. Not to beg. Not to make a scene. Just to reclaim what was mine." Thomas stood, gripping the papers. "If these are real." "They are." For a long time, no one spoke. Then a young teller, not more than 22, stepped forward. Her hands shaking slightly, she bent down and picked up one of the old banknotes, studying it as if it were a holy artifact. She placed it gently on the counter. One by one, the employees followed. Quietly, solemnly, they picked up the pieces of the past and placed them beside the ledger. Dennis, no longer postured for confrontation, simply nodded at Clayton Bell. "You waited a long time for this." "Too long," the old man replied. "But I had to come. Before it's too late." Thomas inhaled deeply and walked toward his office. He would call the legal team, call the board. There would be investigations, hearings, maybe even lawsuits. But he had seen the truth. and so had everyone else. Clayton Bell turned and began walking toward the doors. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. For the first time in half a century, the man who had built Grand Meridian Bank was no longer a ghost. He was home. But just as his hand reached the cold brass handle of the exit, the double glass doors swung open violently. A tall man in a tailored navy suit entered, flanked by 2 lawyers and a security consultant. His face was sharp, his presence imposing. Behind him followed a wave of authority, a senior board member of Grand Meridian, Prescott's grandson, Richard Prescott. Well, Richard said, scanning the room. So the legend returns. Thomas stepped forward, instantly tense. Richard, he brought documents. Real ones. His name's on everything, bank deeds, charter certificates, even the founding ledger. Richard didn't blink. I don't care if he carved his name into the building with a chisel. That man is either a fraud or delusional. He has no legal standing. Clayton turned slowly. He looked tired but not broken. You know the truth. You've always known. Richard scoffed. What I know is that this bank belongs to the Prescott family. And you were trespassing. The room stiffened. Thomas clenched the papers in his hands. You're going to have to answer for this. Richard laughed. What are you going to do? File a motion? Take it to court? Good luck proving anything. My family has more lawyers than you have pens. Clayton reached into his coat and pulled out one final paper, encased in protective plastic. You forgot one thing. He handed it to Thomas. It was a court ruling, dated decades ago, never executed. The court declared my removal illegal, but the injunction never reached the bank. It was suppressed, and I was gone by the time they tried to follow up. Thomas read it, his face growing pale. Then he looked at Richard. This changes everything. And with that, the entire room erupted. Calls were made. Journalists appeared by the hour. State officials reviewed archives. And within weeks, a court date was set. The Prescott legacy trembled. Public opinion swayed. National news outlets reported the tale of the forgotten founder. By the time the court ruled in favor of Clayton R. Bell, the bank had already begun shifting its legacy. Clayton didn't ask for money. He didn't want a title. All he asked for was a chair by the window and a plaque with the truth. And there it sits today, near the marble columns where the sunlight falls just right at 3 p.m. each day. Founded by Clayton R. Bell, 1948. Returned to its rightful history in 2025. The old man sits by that window every Thursday, quiet, watching, remembered.